Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the starship Aurora, watching the blue marble of Ethros Prime grow larger on the main screen. His heart pounded as he realized this moment would change everything for humanity. After decades of searching the stars, they had finally found other intelligent life. And more importantly, these aliens wanted to talk. The Zephyrian ships that had escorted them into the system were unlike anything human engineers had ever imagined. They moved like liquid silver through space, their hulls seeming to shift and flow rather than cut through the void. Jake had watched them for hours during the journey, trying to understand how they worked, but their technology remained a mystery. "Captain, we're receiving another transmission from the surface," Lieutenant Amy Parker announced from her communications station. Her voice carried the same excitement that Jake felt, mixed with nervous energy that had filled the ship for days. "Put it through, Amy." Jake straightened his uniform one more time, knowing that every detail mattered in these first meetings. The diplomatic team had practiced these conversations hundreds of times during the journey, but nothing could truly prepare them for the real thing. The screen flickered, and Ambassador Kira Veltar appeared. Jake still found it hard to believe. He was looking at an actual alien. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, with skin that seemed to glow with a soft blue light. Silver markings covered her arms and face in patterns that the translation computer said indicated high rank in Zephyrian society. Her eyes were larger than human eyes, completely silver without any visible pupils, yet somehow Jake could tell when she was looking directly at him. "Captain Morrison," she said, her voice coming through the translator with a musical quality that made it pleasant to listen to. "We are honored to welcome humanity to Ethros Prime. Our leaders are eager to meet with you and discuss how your people might join our alliance." Jake smiled and nodded. "The honor is ours, Ambassador. Humanity has dreamed of this day for generations. We come in peace, hoping to learn and share knowledge with your people." "Excellent," Kira replied, and Jake thought he could see something like a smile on her alien features. "We have prepared quarters for your delegation in our capital city. However, there is one matter we must discuss before you arrive. To be accepted as equals in the alliance, your people must undergo our traditional bonding ceremony." Dr. Lisa Chun, the mission's lead scientist, stepped forward. She had spent months studying what little information they had about Zephyrian culture. "Ambassador, could you explain more about this ceremony? We want to make sure we understand the cultural significance." Kira tilted her head in what seemed to be a thoughtful gesture. "Of course. The bonding ceremony has been used for thousands of years when new species join our alliance. It creates a connection between your people and ours, showing that we are willing to share not just trade agreements, but true friendship and trust." Jake felt relief wash over him. A friendship ceremony sounded reasonable, even important. If this was what it took to secure humanity's place among the stars, he was more than willing to participate. "What does the ceremony involve?" "It is quite simple," Kira explained. "Representatives from both species speak traditional vows of unity and cooperation. You would need to learn some phrases in our language, but our translators will help you understand the meaning. The ceremony takes place in our most sacred temple, showing the importance we place on this new alliance." Amy looked up from her console. "Captain, the diplomatic committee on Earth specifically authorized you to participate in any cultural ceremonies necessary for establishing relations." Jake nodded. The pressure from Earth had been enormous. Humanity needed this alliance. Their resources were running low, and the technology the Zephyrians had shown them could solve problems that had plagued Earth for decades. More than that, being part of an interstellar alliance would mean humanity was no longer alone in the universe. "I would be honored to participate in your ceremony, Ambassador," Jake said formally. "When would this take place?" "Once you arrive and have time to rest, we will begin preparations," Kira replied. "The ceremony is quite beautiful. Many species have told us it was one of the most meaningful experiences of their lives." The transmission ended, and Jake turned to his team. Everyone looked excited but nervous. Dr. Chen was already pulling up her files on Zephyrian culture. while Amy was checking the communication logs to make sure everything had been recorded properly. "Well, people, this is it," Jake said. "We're about to make history." 3 hours later, the Aurora settled onto a landing pad in the Zephyrian capital city. Jake had never seen anything like it. The buildings seemed to grow out of the ground like enormous crystals, catching and reflecting the light of Ethros Prime's twin suns. Waterfalls flowed down the sides of many structures, creating a constant musical sound that filled the air. Kira met them at the landing pad, accompanied by several other Zephyrians. Jake noticed that they all moved with a flowing grace that made even their walking look like dancing. Their clothes seemed to be made of the same material as their ships, shifting colors and patterns as they moved. "Welcome to Ethros Prime," Kira said as Jake stepped off the ship. "I hope you find our world beautiful. It's incredible," Jake replied honestly. "I've never seen anything like it." Kira led them through the city, pointing out important buildings and explaining their purposes. Jake learned that the Zephyrians had no concept of private property as humans understood it. Everything was shared among the community, with decisions made through some kind of telepathic consensus that Kira tried to explain but that Jake couldn't quite grasp. Their quarters were in a building that seemed to be made entirely of living crystal. The walls glowed softly, providing light without any visible fixtures. Jake's room overlooked one of the city's main gardens, where Zephyrian families moved among plants that seemed to respond to their presence by changing colors and shapes. "The ceremony will take place tomorrow evening," Kira explained as she showed them around. "Tonight you should rest and prepare yourselves. Tomorrow will be a very important day for both our peoples." As Jake lay in the strange but comfortable bed that night, he thought about how far humanity had come. Just 50 years ago, they had still been wondering if they were alone in the universe. Now he was sleeping in an alien city, preparing to undergo a ceremony that would make humanity part of an interstellar alliance. He fell asleep wondering what the ceremony would be like, never imagining that by tomorrow night his entire life would be completely different. Jake woke up slowly, feeling more rested than he had in weeks. The crystal bed had somehow adjusted to his body perfectly, and the soft glow from the walls had dimmed during the night to let him sleep. For a moment he forgot where he was then. The events of the previous day came rushing back. He sat up and looked around the room, but something was different. This was not the quarters Kira had shown him yesterday. The walls were a deeper blue, and there were personal items scattered around that he had never seen before. Beautiful Zephyrian artwork hung on the walls, and clothes that definitely were not his lay folded on a chair near the window. "Good morning, husband," came a familiar musical voice from behind him. Jake spun around so fast he nearly fell off the bed. Kira was sitting in a chair by the window, wearing flowing robes that seemed to be made of liquid starlight. She was smiling at him in a way that made his stomach drop. "Husband?" Jake managed to croak out. His throat felt dry and his head was spinning. "What do you mean, husband?" Kira tilted her head, looking confused. "We were bonded yesterday in the sacred temple. Do humans not remember their bonding ceremonies? I was told your species has excellent memories." The ceremony came back to Jake. In pieces, he remembered standing in the beautiful crystal temple with hundreds of Zephyrians watching. He remembered Kira standing across from him, both of them wearing special robes. He remembered speaking words in the Zephyrian language that the translator had helped him learn, words about unity and sharing and being together always. "That was a marriage ceremony?" Jake asked, his voice getting louder. "I thought it was just a friendship ritual for the Alliance." Kira stood up gracefully, her silver eyes studying his face. "Of course it was a bonding ceremony. How else would our peoples become truly connected? The Alliance is built on family bonds between species. Each new member must have their representative bonded to one of our ambassadors." Jake put his head in his hands. Oh no. This can't be happening. You seem distressed," Kira observed. "Is there something wrong with the bonding? Do humans have different customs for these ceremonies?" Before Jake could answer, the door chimed and Amy Parker rushed in. She took one look at Jake sitting on the bed in his sleeping clothes and Kira in her bonding robes, and her face went pale. "Captain, we have a problem," Amy said quickly. "I've been going through the cultural files all night, and I think there's been a misunderstanding about yesterday's ceremony." "You think?" Jake said, standing up and grabbing his uniform from where it hung on a chair. "Amy, please tell me you have some good news." Amy looked at her tablet nervously. "Well, the good news is that Zephyrian marriages are not like human marriages. They don't expect romantic love or physical intimacy unless both partners want it. It's more like a political partnership. And the bad news?" Jake asked, though he was afraid to hear the answer. "The bad news is that breaking a bonding ceremony is considered the worst possible insult in Zephyrian culture. If you refuse the marriage, they will see it as humanity rejecting their friendship entirely. We would be banned from the Alliance. Forever." Jake sat down heavily on the bed. "Earth was counting on this alliance. Billions of people needed the technology and resources that the Zephyrians could provide. How could he explain to his commanders that he had accidentally gotten married and destroyed humanity's future among the stars?" Kira had been listening to this conversation with growing confusion. "I do not understand," she said. "Do humans not make bonding agreements for political purposes? How do your species form alliances?" Amy looked between Jake and Kira. "Ambassador, in human culture, marriage is usually based on romantic love between two individuals. We don't typically arrange marriages for political reasons anymore." "How strange," Kira replied. "Zephyrian bondings are arranged by families and governments to create stability and cooperation. Emotional attachment often develops over time, but it is not required at the beginning. I was told that Captain Morrison was an excellent choice for bonding because of his leadership qualities and diplomatic skills." Jake looked up at her. "You didn't choose me yourself?" Kira shook her head. "My family selected you from the information your government provided about your delegation. I agreed because forming bonds with new species is considered a great honor." "Did your government not prepare you for this possibility?" "No," Jake said quietly. "They told me it was just a ceremonial friendship ritual." The three of them sat in uncomfortable silence for several minutes. Jake could hear the sounds of the Zephyrian city through the window, the musical voices and flowing water that had seemed so beautiful yesterday, but now felt like they belonged to an alien world where he was trapped. "So what happens now?" Jake finally asked. Amy consulted her tablet again. "According to Zephyrian law, you're officially bonded for one full cycle of their planet, which is about 18 Earth months. After that, you can request dissolution if both parties agree." 18 months, Jake repeated. 18 months married to someone I just met from a completely different species. Kira stood up and moved to the window. "If this bonding is so distressing to you, perhaps we should contact my family and the Alliance Council. Surely there must be some way to resolve this situation without causing insult to either of our peoples." Jake looked at her profile as she gazed out at the city. She seemed sad now, and he realized that this situation was just as difficult for her as it was for him. She had been prepared for a political marriage with a cooperative human partner, not someone who was horrified by the idea of being bonded to her. "I'm sorry, Kira," Jake said. "This isn't your fault. You didn't know that humans have different customs, and I didn't understand what I was agreeing to." She turned back to face him. "Perhaps we can find a way to make this work for both our peoples. I do not require romantic attachment, and I understand that you have duties to your own species. We could simply be partners in diplomacy." Amy looked hopeful. "That might actually work. You could maintain separate living spaces and just appear together for official functions." Jake thought about it. 18 months was not forever, and if it meant saving humanity's place in the Alliance, maybe he could manage it. "Would that be acceptable to your people, Kira?" Kira nodded slowly. "As long as we fulfill our public duties as bonded partners, my family would be satisfied. Many Zephyrian bondings are conducted this way." "Then I guess we're going to be married for 18 months, Jake said, still hardly believing the words. As they came out of his mouth, neither of them realized that 18 months would be more than enough time for everything to change. 3 weeks had passed since Jake learned he was married. and life in the diplomatic residence had become a series of awkward encounters and cultural mistakes. The building itself was beautiful, with rooms that flowed into each other like water and walls that changed color based on the time of day. But living there with Kira felt like walking through a minefield where every step might cause a diplomatic incident. Jake sat at the breakfast table, trying to eat the Zephyrian food that somehow tasted different every day even when it looked exactly the same. Kira entered the dining room with her usual graceful movements, her silver markings glowing slightly brighter than usual, which Jake had learned meant she was feeling some kind of strong emotion. "Good morning, Jake," she said, settling into the chair across from him. "I sensed your frustration from the other room. Are you having difficulty with the morning meal again?" This was exactly the problem. Kira could read his emotions through her telepathic abilities, which meant Jake had no privacy at all. Every time he felt annoyed or confused or homesick, she knew about it immediately. He had tried to explain the human concept of privacy, but Zephyrians shared their thoughts and feelings naturally, so the idea of hiding emotions seemed strange and unhealthy to them. "I'm fine," Jake said, which was obviously a lie since Kira could sense exactly how he was feeling. "You are not fine," Kira replied patiently. "You're frustrated, lonely, and worried about something." In Zephyrian relationships, we discuss these feelings openly so they do not grow into larger problems. Jake put down his fork and looked at her. "Kira, where I come from, people need space to process their emotions privately. When you read my feelings all the time, it makes me feel like I'm trapped." Kira's markings dimmed slightly, which Jake had learned meant she was hurt or disappointed. "I do not mean to cause you distress, but shutting off my empathic abilities would be like asking you to close your eyes permanently. It is simply how I experience the world." Dr. Lisa Chun entered the dining room at that moment, carrying her tablet and looking tired. She had been working non-stop to help Jake and Kira understand each other's cultures, essentially serving as a translator for more than just language. "Morning, you two," Lisa said, sitting down with her own plate of the color-changing Zephyrian food. "How are things going today?" "Jake is struggling with the empathic connection again," Kira explained. "I am trying to understand why humans prefer to hide their emotions." Lisa nodded thoughtfully. "It's not that we prefer to hide them, exactly. Humans need time to understand our own feelings before we share them. We process emotions internally first, then decide what to communicate to others." "But this seems inefficient," Kira said. "If I can sense that Jake is worried, why should he not simply tell me what concerns him so we can solve the problem together?" Jake sighed. "Because sometimes I don't even know why I'm worried. Sometimes I just need to feel bad for a while before I can figure out what's wrong." Before Kira could respond, Amy Parker's voice came through the communication system. "Captain Morrison, we're receiving an urgent transmission from Earth Command. You're needed in the communications center immediately." Jake stood up quickly, grateful for the interruption. "I'll be right there." The transmission from Earth brought news that changed everything. Admiral Roberts appeared on the screen, his face grim with worry. "Jake, we've got a situation," the Admiral said without preamble. "Our deep space sensors have detected a massive fleet heading toward both Earth and Zephyrian space. The ships don't match any known designs, and they're not responding to communication attempts." Jake felt his stomach drop. "How long do we have?" "Based on their current speed, they'll reach the outer colonies in about 6 weeks. We're mobilizing everything we have, but we need the Alliance's help." "Can the Zephyrians provide military support?" "I'll speak with Kira immediately," Jake replied. "What do we know about these ships?" "Not much. They're big, they're fast, and there are a lot of them. Our analysts think it might be the hegemony that the Zephyrians warned us about." The transmission ended, and Jake turned to find Kira standing in the doorway. Her silver eyes were wide with concern, and her markings were pulsing in a pattern he had never seen before. "You heard?" Jake asked. "I sensed your fear and came to investigate," Kira replied. "If the hegemony has found our space, this is very serious. They are a collective of species that believe in conquest through force. They have destroyed many peaceful civilizations. Jake and Kira rushed to the Alliance Council chambers, where emergency meetings were already beginning. The great crystal dome filled with representatives from dozens of species, all speaking in their various languages while translators worked to keep everyone informed. Kira spoke rapidly with several other Zephyrian officials, her hands moving in complex gestures that Jake was beginning to recognize as their formal debate style. After several minutes, she turned to him with a serious expression. "The Council will provide military support," she said. "But they want to coordinate our defense strategies. Human tactical thinking is very different from ours, and they believe combining our approaches might be more effective against the hegemony." "What? Do you mean different?" Jake asked. "Zephyrians plan battles through group consensus and logical analysis," Kira explained. "We consider all possible outcomes and choose the most efficient path. But humans seem to have something we call creative unpredictability that confuses enemies who expect logical responses." Over the following days, Jake found himself working closely with Kira to coordinate defense plans between human and Zephyrian forces. She would use her telepathic abilities to instantly communicate with multiple Zephyrian commanders, while Jake would relay information to human fleet captains through more traditional methods. Despite their personal difficulties, they made an effective team. Kira's ability to process vast amounts of information quickly complemented Jake's intuitive understanding of human military strategy. When Zephyrian logic suggested one approach, Jake could offer alternatives that might catch enemies off guard. During one late-night planning session, Jake noticed that Kira looked exhausted. Her usually bright markings had faded, and she was moving more slowly than usual. "Are you okay?" he asked, surprising himself with how much he cared about her answer. "Maintaining telepathic contact with so many minds is tiring," she admitted. "But it is necessary for coordinating our fleets effectively." Jake realized that while he had been focusing on his own discomfort with their situation, Kira had been working just as hard to make their partnership successful. She was sacrificing her own comfort to help defend both their peoples. "Maybe you should rest," Jake suggested. "I can handle the human communications for a few hours." Kira looked at him with something that might have been gratitude. "Thank you, Jake. I did not expect such consideration from someone who finds our bonding so difficult." As she left the planning room, Jake realized that somewhere between the cultural misunderstandings and emergency meetings, he had stopped thinking of Kira as just an alien he was trapped with. She was becoming someone he genuinely respected, and maybe even someone he could learn to care about. The hegemony fleet was still weeks away, but Jake was beginning to understand that the real battle might be learning to work together with someone completely different from himself. The alert sirens woke Jake from the deepest sleep he had managed in weeks. Red lights flashed throughout the diplomatic residence as emergency messages flooded the communication systems. He stumbled out of bed and found Kira already in the main room, her silver markings pulsing rapidly as she received telepathic updates from across the planet. "The hegemony has attacked 3 human colonies," she said without looking up. "Your people are requesting immediate assistance." Jake's blood ran cold. Those colonies housed millions of people, including families and children who had never signed up for any kind of war. "How bad is it?" "2 colonies have gone completely silent," Kira replied, her voice heavy with sadness. "The 3rd is still fighting, but they will not last long without reinforcements." Within minutes, Jake was in the Alliance Command Center, arguing with military leaders who spoke through translators about response times and fleet positions. Every second they debated was another second that people were dying. "We need to move now," Jake insisted. "Those colonies can't wait for a perfect strategic plan." Commander Thex, a tall Zephyrian with gold markings that indicated military rank, gestured dismissively. "Captain Morrison, rushing into battle without proper preparation will only result in more deaths. We must analyze the hegemony attack patterns and coordinate our response logically." Jake felt frustration boiling up inside him. The Zephyrian approach to everything was so careful and methodical, but sometimes people needed help right away, not after hours of planning meetings. "With respect, Commander, while you're analyzing patterns, Real people are dying, Jake said, his voice getting louder. Sometimes you have to act on instinct and worry about the perfect plan later. The room fell silent. Jake realized he had just challenged a high-ranking military officer in front of the entire Alliance command staff. In human military culture, this might have been acceptable debate, but he had no idea how Zephyrians would react. Kira stepped forward gracefully. Commander Thex, perhaps we could benefit from combining both approaches. Human instinct and Zephyrian analysis together might be more effective than either alone. Commander Thex looked at her thoughtfully. What do you suggest, Ambassador? I will accompany Captain Morrison to the battle zone, Kira said. My telepathic abilities can provide real-time intelligence about hegemony tactics, while his human unpredictability can confuse their strategic computers. Jake stared at her. You want to come with me to a war zone? Our peoples are bonded now, Kira replied simply. Where you go to defend humanity, I go as well. 2 hours later, Jake found himself on the bridge of a Zephyrian warship unlike anything he had ever seen. The vessel seemed to be alive, with walls that pulsed gently and controls that responded to thought as much as touch. Kira sat beside him in what the crew called the harmony chair, her eyes closed as she connected mentally with scouts throughout the battle area. The hegemony ships are strange, she reported. They move in perfect formation, like they are controlled by a single mind. But there is something else, something that feels familiar. Familiar how? Jake asked. I sense other telepaths among them, Kira said, her voice troubled. But their thoughts are wrong, twisted somehow? They feel like Zephyrians, but not like any I've encountered before. The ship dropped out of hyperspace near the besieged colony of New Dallas. Jake's heart sank as he saw the damage on the main screen. Several of the orbital stations were gone completely, and the planetary surface showed the scars of energy weapons that had burned entire cities. There, Kira said suddenly, pointing to a cluster of dark ships near the planet. The hegemony fleet. They are preparing to destroy the remaining population centers. Jake opened the communication channel to the human defense forces still fighting near the planet. This is Captain Morrison on the Zephyrian vessel Crystal Wind. What's your status? Down there, Captain Morrison? Came a surprised voice. This is Colonel Davis, sir. We've lost about 60% of our ships, and the enemy just keeps coming. Their tactics don't make any sense, but somehow they're winning anyway. Hold your position, Colonel, Jake replied. We're going to try something different. He turned to the Zephyrian ship captain, an elegant female named Syrah, who had been listening to everything with interest. Captain Syrah, can your ship do something completely unexpected? What do you mean? Syrah asked. Instead of attacking their strongest ships first like a normal battle plan would suggest, what if we ignored them completely and went straight for their weakest vessels? Make them think we're either crazy or we know something they don't. Kira opened her eyes, looking intrigued. That is certainly unpredictable. Most species would attack the greatest threat first. Exactly, Jake said. But if we take out their small ships first, it might force their big ships to break formation to protect them. Then we can hit them while they're confused. Captain Syrah considered this for a moment, then nodded. Very well. It is certainly more interesting than our usual approach. The Crystal Wind dove toward the hegemony fleet, ignoring the massive battleships and heading straight for a group of smaller escort vessels. Jake watched on the main screen as the enemy formation wavered, clearly uncertain how to respond to this unusual tactic. It's working, Kira reported, her eyes still closed as she monitored enemy communications. Their commanders are arguing about whether to maintain formation or protect the smaller ships. The telepaths I sensed earlier are becoming agitated. The battle that followed was unlike anything Jake had experienced. The Zephyrian ship moved like water, flowing around enemy fire while delivering precise strikes that disabled rather than destroyed. Kira provided constant updates on enemy intentions, allowing them to stay one step ahead of every attack. Jake, Kira said suddenly, her voice urgent. The telepaths on the enemy ships, I can sense them more clearly now. They are not hegemony at all. They are Zephyrians, but their minds have been altered somehow, forced to serve against their will. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. You mean the hegemony is using enslaved Zephyrians to coordinate their fleets? Yes, Kira replied, tears flowing down her blue cheeks. My own people, captured and twisted into weapons. This is why their tactics seemed both familiar and wrong. The revelation changed everything. This was not just a war between different species, but a rescue mission to save Zephyrians who had been turned into tools of conquest. Jake reached out and took Kira's hand, feeling her pain as if it were his own. We're going to get them back. He promised, all of them. As the battle continued around the colony, Jake began to understand that his relationship with Kira had become something much deeper than a diplomatic arrangement. They were partners now, fighting together to protect both their peoples from an enemy that threatened everything they cared about. When the last hegemony ship retreated, Jake realized that he no longer thought of Kira as an alien he had been forced to marry. She had become someone he trusted completely, someone whose strength and courage inspired him to be better than he thought possible. 6 months had passed since the battle at New Dallas, and Jake stood in the Victory Garden on Ethros Prime, watching the sunset paint the crystal buildings in shades of gold and purple. The war with the hegemony was over, ended not through destruction, but through the rescue of the enslaved Zephyrian telepaths who had been forced to coordinate enemy fleets. Without their unwilling help, the hegemony ships had become confused and disorganized, making them easy targets for the combined human and alliance forces. Kira approached from behind, her footsteps so light he barely heard them on the garden path. Over the months of fighting together, Jake had learned to recognize her presence even when she tried to move quietly. She carried a formal document in her hands, and her silver markings were dim with what he now knew was sadness. The Alliance Council has made their decision, she said softly, holding out the document. They are offering you the annulment we discussed when this all began. Jake took the papers but did not look at them. Instead, he studied Kira's face, trying to read the emotions she was working so hard to hide. Is that what you want? It does. Not matter what I want, Kira replied, though her voice betrayed her feelings. Our bonding was an accident. You never chose to marry me, and now that the crisis is over, you are free to return to your old life. Jake set the papers down on a nearby bench without opening them. Kira, look at me. She raised her silver eyes to meet his, and Jake saw his own reflection in them. Somewhere during the long months of war, he had stopped seeing an alien when he looked at her. Now he saw his partner, his friend, and something much more important that he was only beginning to understand. Do you remember the first time we had to share a telepathic link during battle? Jake asked. Kira nodded. You were terrified. Most humans cannot handle direct mental contact with our species. I was terrified, Jake agreed, but not of you. I was afraid of what I might feel if I let you that close to my thoughts. And what did you feel? Kira asked quietly. Jake reached out and took her hands in his. I felt like I was home for the first time in my life. Kira's markings began to glow brighter. Jake, you do not have to say these things to spare my feelings. I understand that humans form emotional attachments differently than we do. That's just it, Jake said. I think we're more alike than anyone realized. You told me once that Zephyrian bondings start as partnerships and sometimes grow into something deeper. Well, somewhere between arguing about privacy and fighting battles together, this partnership became the most important thing in my life. Kira stepped closer to him. Are you saying that you want to remain bonded, even though you could be free? I'm saying that I don't want to be free, Jake replied. I want to be here with you, building something that nobody thought was possible. Before Kira could respond, Amy Parker came running down the garden path, her face bright with excitement. Captain, you need to see this. The news feeds from Earth are going crazy. She handed Jake her tablet, which showed news reports from across human space. The headlines all said basically the same thing. Human captain chooses love over freedom and interspecies. Marriage becomes symbol of unity, and the wedding that saved 2 worlds. It seems your decision has already become public knowledge. Amy said with a grin. Earth Command is calling you a hero for strengthening the human-Zephyrian alliance through personal sacrifice. Jake laughed. Personal sacrifice? This is the best thing that ever happened to me? Kira tilted her head in the gesture he had come to love. So you will not be returning to Earth? Earth will always be my homeworld, Jake said. But home is wherever you are now. 3 weeks later, Jake found himself standing in the same crystal temple where he had accidentally gotten married, but this time he knew exactly what he was doing. The ceremony was being broadcast across both human and Zephyrian space, watched by billions of people who saw it as proof that different species could truly become family. Kira looked radiant in traditional bonding robes that shifted color, with her emotions currently showing the deep blues and silvers that meant joy and contentment. Jake wore a specially designed uniform that combined human and Zephyrian elements, symbolizing the bridge they had built between their peoples. Do you, Jake Morrison of Earth, choose to remain bonded to Kira Veltar of Ethros Prime, not from duty or diplomacy, but from the connection of hearts and minds? Asked the Zephyrian elder conducting the ceremony. I do, Jake said, and meant it more than any words he had ever spoken. Do you, Kira Veltar of Ethros Prime, choose to remain bonded to Jake Morrison of Earth, accepting the challenges and joys of building love between different worlds? I do, Kira replied, her voice carrying the musical quality that still made. Jake's heart skipped a beat. As they exchanged new vows. Jake felt Kira's mind touch his in the gentle telepathic connection they had learned to share. Instead of the invasion of privacy he had once feared, it felt like the most natural thing in the world to let her sense his emotions while he felt hers in return. The celebration that followed lasted for 3 days, and included guests from dozens of species throughout the Alliance. Jake danced to music that mixed human melodies with Zephyrian harmonies, ate food that somehow tasted like home even though it came from alien plants, and listened to toasts in languages he was still learning to understand on their actual honeymoon. They traveled to a small moon where the first human Zephyrian research station was being built. They would both be working there, Jake as the station commander and Kira as the head of cultural exchange programs. It was perfect work for both of them, combining Jake's leadership skills with Kira's gift for helping different species understand each other. Do you ever regret it? Kira asked one evening as they watched Earth rise over the horizon of their new home. Giving up your old life for something so uncertain? Jake pulled her closer, marveling as always at how perfectly she fit against his. Sighed despite their physical differences. The only thing I regret is that it took me so long to realize what we had. And what do we have? Kira asked, though her telepathic abilities meant she already knew his answer. We have proof that love can happen anywhere, between anyone, if people are brave enough to let it grow, Jake said. We have the foundation for a future where humans and Zephyrians aren't just allies, but family. As if to prove his point, Kira placed his hand on her stomach where the first human Zephyrian children were already beginning to develop. Their children would grow up bilingual and bi-telepathic, able to bridge the gap between species in ways that their parents could only dream of. Jake had come to the stars thinking he was on a simple diplomatic mission. Instead, he had found love, purpose, and a future that was bigger and more beautiful than anything he could have imagined. Sometimes the best things in life really did come from the most unexpected places.